ago, when I was started in the field, we knew that nitric oxide was a vasodilator. So it's produced by the lining of the blood vessels. It's gone in less than a second, but it signals. But in this study in 2015, it was recognized that nitric oxide is required for oxygen uptake and delivery. So now the cardiorespiratory cycle is a three-gas system. We breathe in oxygen, we excrete CO2, but this does not work without nitric oxide. And in fact, there's nitric oxide bound to a single cysteine residue on the beta chain of hemoglobin. Without nitric oxide, you cannot deliver oxygen. We witnessed this in COVID over the past 3 years, and we had a nitric oxide drug in phase 3 clinical trials. We take a patient with blood oxygen saturation of 78, give them our nitric oxide drug, we can improve their blood oxygen saturation to 98, breathing room air without a mechanical vent, and we saved many lives during that study. But it's involved in every biological function, and I'm going to take you very quickly through this. And so my hope is to give you kind of a little bit of information on a lot of subject matter to nitric oxide. But it's involved in every biological function. It's how our stem cells mobilize and differentiate. It's responsible for erections in men and women. And it was so important that a Nobel Prize was awarded in 1998 for the 3 gentlemen who discovered nitric oxide. And it was Fred who recruited me to join the faculty of UT Medical School in Houston in 2005, where we had a drug discovery program. Unfortunately, Fred passed away just a couple of days ago. But it was he who really gave me my first faculty position to develop my own independent career. And then Lou Ignarro has written the foreword to several of my textbooks. So if you can't make nitric oxide, what happens? We develop high blood pressure. You develop erectile dysfunction, vascular dementia, Alzheimer's, diabetes. I don't have time to show you the data that we published in 2009 on the role of nitric oxide in insulin signaling and glucose uptake. But these are the major unmet or poorly managed diseases that people are facing, and physicians, allopathic physicians, do a really poor job of managing over time. These are also the risk factors for COVID. And that was our impetus for going into FDA clinical trials for COVID, because the people that were dying and getting sick from COVID were the people who couldn't make nitric oxide. So let's dig a little bit deeper and get down to the basics of vascular biology. That a man is as old as his arteries. The older we get, the less nitric oxide we make, and that's responsible for age-related atherosclerotic disease. So this plaque deposition and plaque rupture leads to heart attack and stroke, the #1 killer of men and women worldwide. But when you lose the ability to make nitric oxide in the lining of the blood vessels, that sets the stage for this plaque deposition and atherosclerosis process. In fact, the functional loss of nitric oxide precedes these structural changes by many years, sometimes decades. So we need to know how well our blood vessels make nitric oxide. Because if you have endothelial dysfunction, you're on a very slippery slope to rapid onset and progression of cardiovascular disease. We're all here because we're interested in overcoming the aging process, or at least living better, living longer. And so there's some objective measures of aging. And these 3 main hypotheses: telomeres, followed Bill Andrews for many, many years, the ends of the chromosomes, there's mitochondrial dysfunction. Every single chronic disease is characterized by lower numbers of mitochondria, mitochondrial dysfunction, and then loss of stem cell function and repair. Nitric oxide controls all 3 of these. So now we have a unified theory of aging. And so you cannot improve your telomeres without nitric oxide. You can't improve mitochondria without nitric oxide. And you cannot mobilize and differentiate your own stem cells, or if you're getting stem cell therapy, without first repleting nitric oxide. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because this audience certainly knows the importance of telomeres, the ends of the chromosomes. The data tell us that the shorter the telomeres, the shorter the lifespan. If you can prevent telomere shortening, you can prevent early demise. These were the data that showed us very early on that nitric oxide is what controls and regulates telomerase activity. So it's not only controls the activity of the enzyme, it controls the nuclear expression. So if you have endothelial dysfunction, which means you have an uncoupled NOS enzyme, you not only lose the genetic expression of the telomerase enzyme, but you lose the function. And you'll see on that last study that nitric oxide is the master signaling molecule in the regulation of telomerase, and now provides an opportunity for innovative therapeutic approaches. Mitochondria, the energy-producing organelles of the cell. Again, every single chronic disease, decreased mitochondria, decreased energy efficiency of ATP. Nitric oxide is what controls every aspect about mitochondrial respiration, the reduction of molecular oxygen into water and ATP. If you want to do intermittent fasting, caloric restrictions, sirtuins, if you don't have a functional nitric oxide synthase enzyme, none of these modalities work. Because you can see here the induction of mitochondrial biogenesis by the induction of PGC1 alpha is dependent upon the cell's ability to make nitric oxide. So you want to get the benefits of intermittent fasting, caloric restrictions, NAD, sirtuins, you must have a functional nitric oxide synthase enzyme. And it also extends the oxygen gradient into tissue. So you want to talk about performance, athletic performance. When you restore nitric oxide, you have more mitochondria generating more ATP more efficiently with less oxygen. Now you become a well-oiled machine. And mechanistically, we know this is affecting complex 1 and complex 4. So the entire mechanism of the cytoprotective effects of nitric oxide and ischemia, reperfusion, injury, or modulating oxygen consumption is very well defined. And what about stem cells? We're constantly wearing ourselves out. We just have to repair and replace dysfunctional tissues. And that's the role of our endogenous stem cells. These are the papers that really told us that nitric oxide is the requisite signal for stem cell mobilization and differentiation. When I was at the Institute of Molecular Medicine at Texas Heart Institute, we basically predicted that the availability of nitric oxide predicted stem cell success, therapy, or failure. So by every objective measure, if you want to live longer and better, your body must be able to produce nitric oxide. So how do we do this? And I'm not going to get into the biochemistry here, but just suffice it to say that there's two ways the body makes nitric oxide. There's an enzyme in the lining of the blood vessels, the endothelial cells, that make nitric oxide, controls vascular tone. And now, interestingly, about 25 years ago, we discovered that we get nitric oxide from our diet. And as I'll show you, it'll explain the mechanism of a plant-based diet, Japanese diet, Mediterranean diet. So if we dissect both of these pathways, the function of the NOS enzyme in the lining of the blood vessel gets less functional with age. So the older we get, the less we make in the lining of the blood vessel. And this is responsible for age-related disease. So our whole question was, can we prevent this age-related decline in nitric oxide production, or at least shift the curve to the right? And if so, could we prevent age-related disease? And the short answer is yes. So let me show you how this is designed to work, because this is very important. Everybody in here knows how Viagra works for erectile dysfunction. Viagra is dependent upon the ability of the cell to make nitric oxide. So when nitric oxide is produced, it's a gas that diffuses in the underlying smooth muscle, activates an enzyme called guanylyl cyclase. This enzyme converts GTP into cyclic GMP, calcium-dependent smooth muscle relaxation, and vasodilation. Viagra is what's called a phosphodiesterase inhibitor. So nitric oxide turns the switch on, Viagra keeps it on. And that's why you're warned against a 4-hour erection, unsafe drop in blood pressure, and all the side effects. These drugs have been on the market for 25 years, and only 50% of the men that are prescribed these drugs respond with better erections. Why is that? It's because they're not making enough nitric oxide in the lining of the blood vessels